Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 154. Dark Castle. Part 4. Han Suyang heard my story and muttered in a dumbfounded manner. Did you really become a constellation? A person who was an incarnation a few days ago suddenly appeared as a constellation. Certainly, it was strange. Han Suyang hadn't read anything about an incarnation being reborn as a constellation. Yes. I am a constellation. Really, seriously? That's right. Han Suyang's eyes were filled with disbelief. Is it that easy? I wanted to say it wasn't easy, but Han Suyang didn't listen. Shit, will you now be watching us outside the scenario and sponsoring us? Nothing like that. I became a constellation in the course of the scenario, so I have to keep participating in the scenario. What's the difference? I can't tell at all. In fact, I didn't feel it was real either. Borrowing stories, trading with other constellations and nebulae, changing the attitude of the constellations towards me. Some constellations are jealous of your growth. Some constellations oppose you having a modifier. Some constellations show hostility towards you. In any case, the constellations also felt the ugliness of jealousy. Why were they so harsh towards a growing bud? Still, there was something I could do now. You stare at the other constellations. Some constellations are staring at you with amazement. Some constellations have spat out the coke they are drinking with surprise. 200 coins have been consumed to send an indirect message. As expected, indirect messages cost coins. It was fun, but I had to use it in moderation. Han Suyang was staring at me with an open mouth. Was it you who just sent the message? The constellation who doesn't yet have a name? That was what it looked like to Han Suyang. Yes. Is it because you haven't signed a sponsor contract until now? Yes. Then is it already too late for me? You could say that. Han Suyang frowned and looked up at the air. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon hesitantly reads her face. Han Suyang sighed and glanced at me. Shit. I'm envious. By the way, why don't you have a modifier? That. Why didn't I have a modifier? The correct answer was that I didn't know. The star stream is looking for a modifier for your constellation. Perhaps it was because I haven't accumulated enough stories. A constellation without a modifier was similar to gaining a citizenship without having a home. Han Suyang muttered, "You are a vagabond. The fifth story isn't over yet. Maybe I will have a modifier by the time this story is finalized." The fifth story, Lone Messiah, is currently in progress. The fifth story was a story that greatly affected the status of the constellation. The position of my constellation would depend on how the story was finalized. Maybe. Then Han Suyang booed. Boo. Kim Dokja, why you suddenly look cool? Then can you beat Yu Jonghyuk? Yu Jonghyuk. I clenched my fist and opened it. Then there was a message I had never seen before. Beware of the probability storm effect. The star stream is currently evaluating your level. There was a prickly feeling at the tips of my fingers. This was a problem for constellations. Still, I would be fine as long as the evaluation was in progress. The star stream didn't know the right level of constraints for me yet. I might be able to win against him now. Really? The point was the word now. The protagonist was the protagonist for a reason. I could only match his growth by becoming a constellation. The perks that Yu Jonghyuk received were huge. I ordered her, "Quickly return what I gave you." Che, I understand. The incarnation, Han Suyang, has fulfilled the contract. I received all the coins and items I had left with Han Suyang. Han Suyang sighed. It's too bad. I felt rich for a while. I gave you 20,000 coins for the trouble. I handed over 600,000 coins, but only got 20,000 in return. Then you can get back the 20,000 coins. Han Suyang scoffed and turned her back to me. I received my items and coins from Han Suyang. Possessed coins, 684,353 C. In the meantime, I had collected a lot of money. It wasn't strange, since I made a steady income and saved money. Now that I was a constellation, I no longer hesitated in using coins. The coins would exert their real strength from now on. Then little by little, wait. I forgot an important thing. Han Soo-young, when will you release that? It is sexual harassment. Eh? I forgot. Han Soo-young smiled, and I approached Lee Hyun-sung, who was sitting on the floor holding his head in his hands. Han Soo-young's clones were still dancing naked around Lee Hyun-sung. The character, Lee Hyun-sung, is shaking with fear. The steel sword is weak to women. There was such a sentence in Ways of Survival, but I hadn't thought it was so severe. Besides that, it isn't real. Han Soo-young's clones looked naked, but they didn't have the important parts. In other words, Lee Hyun-sung had become like this, because he saw mannequins. Han Soo-young noticed the meaning of my words and laughed mischievously. HRMM, what does that mean? You are sorry because you didn't get to see them? I told you. I don't like a poor body like yours. You haven't even seen it. Do I need to see it? I approached Lee Hyun-sung and patted him on the back. Hyun-sung SSI, are you okay? D-Dokja SSI. He looked stupid, but he wasn't crazy. Lee Hyun-sung looked at me like he had seen a ghost. Why is Dokja SSI, you are, dead? I think he got a real trauma. I looked at Han Soo-young with annoyance. It was a comic-like situation, but it would have been a serious blow for the steel sword. If I didn't something wrong in this round, Lee Hyun-sung might step on an unknown route. For the moment, I had to rely on time for him to recover. Then another voice was heard from the side. Excuse me. Can I go? The last member of Pink Kids entered my eyes. She had a pretty face and slender body. She had fine eyebrows and tender cheeks. Who would believe this person was an uncle in his 40s? What is your name? I asked, and a pretty voice answered. Seo-ina. That's not his real name. Seo-ina hesitated before speaking his true name. I am Kim Yong-pal. Pink Kids, Kim Yong-pal. I found the right person. Han Soo-young clicked her tongue. Why are you keeping him alive? Aren't the Pink Kids scum? Not yet. They will become bad guys. If you read it correctly, you should know that the Pink Kids was originally a trio. But there are 4, eh? I explained, this uncle died before they became really active. Is that why I couldn't remember him? Kim Yong-pal is basically a pure person. Thus, he was the first to die in Pink Kids. Kim Yong-pal interrupted. Excuse me, what are you talking about? Shut up. Han Soo-young frowned at him. This is a pure person? Yes. I also couldn't believe it, but it was a setting in Ways of Survival. A constellation who likes to change sex is nodding. A constellation who likes to change sex claims there are no bad people among those who like to change sex. In fact, Kim Yong-pal survived to this day without killing anyone, even in the first scenario. I could come up with the insect killing method in the first scenario because there was a precedent where Kim Yong-pal stepped on an ant by mistake and survived. Of course, Kim Yong-pal didn't know why he had survived. He was a person who fortunately survived. This was Kim Yong-pal of Pink Kids. No, I should call it Pink Kid now that his companions were dead. Han Soo-young muttered like she didn't want to admit it. Damn, so what? In any case, you saved him because there is a use for him? Yes. Then now what? We have to break the scenario again. Do you know that this scenario is? Of course I knew. I knew it very well. It is the last scenario before the liberation of Seoul Dome. The 9th scenario, Dark Castle. In this scenario, beings that had never appeared before emerged. I watched Lee Hyun-sung, who was still trembling with fear, the unconscious Lee Jae-hai, and Shin Yu-sung, who was caring for the injured Lee Gil-young. Maybe my other companions were alive somewhere. There was Young Hee-won, so they wouldn't be defeated so easily on the first floor. The first floor is just a joke. The real hell is the second floor. A special window in the castle showed the outside landscape. Crowds were moving around Seoul. Unfortunately, in the absence of the greatest sacrifice and the ensuing struggle, half of Seoul had become demon servants. The incarnations of Seoul were shouting sorrowfully. Despair already covered Seoul, but the story was still lacking. The story was always lacking. The Dakibis were seeking larger frustration. The constellations were yearning for more provocative story. Han Soo-young stared out the window and spoke. It is a cliché imagination. Regressors, returnees, reincarnators. Now there are demons? A person who plagiarized is saying this. Hey, I told you a couple of times. I was joking as usual when I suddenly became curious. Han Soo-young. What is it? If you are the writer of Ways of Survival, I didn't write that garbage. Let's just assume. The grumpy Han Soo-young bit her lips. If I am the writer? If you are the writer of Ways of Survival, why did you make this world? How should I know? You are also writer. How can a first-rate writer like me know the thoughts of a third-rate writer? I was an idiot for asking her. Han Soo-young continued speaking. I should be the one asking you that. What? I met Han Soo-young's deep eyes. I couldn't read Han Soo-young even if I used Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Still, I seemed to understand a bit. A person who read the story might have similar thoughts. You know the end of this world. Isn't that right? Han Soo-young was obviously asking this. As always, I didn't answer. Han Soo-young stared out the window like she knew she wouldn't receive an answer. Then she asked another question. Why do the scenarios exist? I stared out the window. The dark sky above the destroyed soul could be seen. Was it because I had become a constellation? The sky wasn't the same as before. Countless constellations were embroidering the sky. The star stream was embracing the constellations. They were stars that could never be reached despite being so close. Even with so many stars shining, there was the distant abyss that couldn't be erased. I felt like I had discovered something. What were the constellations always enduring? Why were they so obsessed with the story? I shook off this distant emotion and opened my mouth. Perhaps the scenario. Chapter 155. Dark Castle. Part 5. This was a question that had been countless beings in the star stream received over many years. Why the hell does the scenario exist? The answers to this question were different. For example, the returnee Kyrios Rodgram said, without it, the universe would be too lonely. The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, replied to the same question, are you asking me why food exists? The demon king Asmodeus replied to the same question was as followed, it is a small destruction to prevent greater destruction. The answers might be romantic or philosophical to people who heard it. However, romantic and philosophical were only luxuries for those who were full in the first place. Therefore, to the demon Earl Tentatio on the second floor of Dark Castle, the scenario meant the following. It is fucked up. This was his way of speaking, although technically, they weren't his own words. Anyone who entered this space would say this after 50 years. Of course, if they managed to survive 50 years. I'm tired. The river running through the Abyss Plains was a tributary of the demon world's river, Phoenix. One might ask how there was such a huge plains on the second floor of Dark Castle, but naturally Tentatio was different. There were only two things he knew. First, he had to reach the top of the vast plains, and second, he hadn't managed to do it in 194 years. Damn it, if it wasn't for that Dakibi's offer at the time. The memories from 194 years ago were still vivid. Do you want to become the 73rd Demon King? Demon King. It was the long-cherished dream of all demons. Can I become the Demon King? He had asked. He was a third-grade demon and still far from rising to that status. It was hard to climb up, no matter how many low-grade demons he ate. During that period, Tentatio was tempted by a being more demonic than a great demon. You are lacking a story, not strength. What does that mean? You will find out if you participate in the scenario. Thus, Tentatio was put into the Dark Castle scenario. He tore down many demons and slaughtered the races that came up from the first floor of Dark Castle. After 194 years, Tentatio had become one of the 10 strongest demons on the Dark Castle second floor. However, it was up to here. I can't go up to the third floor. The Dark Castle's third floor. This was where the essence of a demon king was sleeping. In order to get there, he had to beat the strongest beings on the second floor. However, raising strength and coins wasn't enough. The best beings on the second floor weren't the strongest simply because of strength. The thing Tentatio was lacking. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep wants to talk to you alone. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is curious about your setting. Setting? Fucking bastards. I know what I'm made of. He didn't like constellations, but it was pleasant to see a constellation wondering about him. The constellation wondering about him meant new people were coming from the first floor of Dark Castle. It meant the enjoyable game would start from now on. A group of men and women appeared. Tentatio smiled at the sight. Welcome, you bugs. This is the second floor of Dark Castle. Tentatio enjoyed speaking the lines of an ambassador like it was a habit. As expected, some of the bugs came forward and asked him, "What is this place? Who are you? A guide? Are you perhaps a Dakibi?" Dakibi. They were existences that Tentatio hated the most. Still, he endured it and opened his mouth. There would be a time of sweet rewards after the patience. The second floor of Dark Castle is a world of survival of the fittest. Only those who have their strength acknowledged can move to the next floor. Isn't it a simple rule? Raise your hands if you need further explanations. What does it mean to have your strength acknowledged? How do we, by doing this? Tentatio's arms stretched out and the head of the speaking man literally exploded. The bugs had frightened expressions. This was Tentatio's favorite moment. What? Shit. It is a trap. Tentatio laughed and licked the blood that splattered from the man's neck. Protect the queen. All the incarnations rushed towards him, but Tentatio didn't mind. A strong energy rose from his body. The demon nobility went from Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount and Baron. The Viscount and Baron graders were fairly common, but the difference started from the Earl grade. Demons from the Earl grade had a story. A story, it only opened when specific situations occurred. The story Bug Slaughter has begun. Quack. Every time his hands moved, the humans died like bugs. This story was obtained by slaughtering hundreds of thousands of players in 194 years. It showed overwhelming power against those who were lower than him. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is surprised. Quahahaha. The surrounding incarnations quickly became corpses or were wounded. It is too dull. Some incarnations seemed useful, but more of them were garbage. At most, they could be transformed into 5th grade demons. Then Tentatio's gaze stopped on someone. Ho, you will be 4th grade. Tentatio grabbed the neck of a woman and lifted her up. The hair of the woman scattered. A broken crown rolled around. She was the king of beauty, Min Jaiwan. Tentatio opened his mouth. You must be the leader of these guys. He liked her strong gaze. This woman's story must be quite delicious. I will ask you 2 things. Where do you come from? Telling you something like that, I've seen many bugs like you. Tentatio made a cruel smile and trampled on one of the Warang. Min Jaiwan paled as she looked at the broken skull and brain matter. Wait a minute. Piak. Piak. Stop. Earth, we are from Earth. Tentatio laughed. Earth? Tentatio remembered it as a planet full of rich stories. The Demon Kings. Earth is like a cradle for stories like that. There were many prey in a place abundant with stories. Tentatio licked his lips. Bug. Who has the most stories among you? You, stories? What is that? As expected, she didn't understand him. Who is the strongest among you? Min Jaiwen shook as Tentatio's yellow eyes gazed greedily at her. Then what is the scenario? I just told you. How can I understand those symbolic words? I moved with Han Suyang towards the altar for the second floor. We encountered a few demons on the way. Needless to say, our progress was smooth. It was because I used the status of a constellation whenever I saw a demon. The dark trackers who encountered my eyes screamed and trembled. I might not be a narrative or upper grade level, but once I became a constellation, my presence itself was different. In other words, I could exercise considerable influence over those lower than me with just a glance or remark. The constellation prisoner of the golden headband is disappointed in the too easy progress. The constellation scribe of heaven says you need greater adversity. It was a sweet potato when difficult, but boring when it was easy. I didn't know which one to cater to. Shouldn't there be days like this sometimes? It was the first time a scenario was easy. I was collecting the demon proofs one by one when a familiar voice was heard in the air. Kim Dokja. Don't you look good? Did you open the Dakibi bag alone? I could tell straight away who was speaking. I grunted and sent back a message. Who was the one who suddenly disappeared? It was an intermediate Dakibi. Who has a big head now? I couldn't come because I was busy. In any case, it is late, but congratulations. A new constellation emerged from my channel. It is very emotional. Is the channel running well? Yes. I thought the incarnation seekers would leave after you became a constellation, but it actually became better. Everyone has come to watch the castle scenario, so it is hectic right now. We might have to expand the channel soon. That much? Indeed, it was rare for an incarnation to become a constellation during the scenario. However, there are some who dislike you. You should be careful. Honestly, you are a constellation, but your status isn't completely established. It was as Baihyung said. I was a constellation, but my stigma hadn't woken up yet. In other words, I was currently more like a half constellation. I heard you are stronger than Yu Jonghyuk, but honestly, I'm stronger. Oh. Kim Dokja. Isn't this different from your usual reaction? Do you feel a sense of rivalry? I'm a constellation. He is an incarnation. It is natural for me to be stronger. Is it really like that? What are you trying to say? Did you come for a fight? I think the child will be born soon. I need a story to feed her. You are her father and should play the role of a parent. I understand. I'll get it for you. Brat, I like you because you understand quickly. Then I'm asking you. It was almost time for the 41st regression Shin Yu-sung to wake up. I looked back and saw the party members collecting demon proofs from the bodies of the demons. Does everyone have enough proofs? Shin Yu-sung carefully raised her hand. I am still lacking. Gilyung also. I can help. She seemed like she would be annoyed, but surprisingly, Han Suyang took good care of Shin Yu-sung. Lee Hyunsung was carrying Lee Gilyung on his back and spoke to me. Didokja Sasai. Yes. Can I ask you something? What is it? Lee Hyunsung had barely escaped from Han Suyang's nightmare, and he still seemed unable to believe I had survived. Sometimes he would grab my arm or my head. Lee Hyunsung touched my head and then opened his mouth. In the past, I lost an empty cartridge in the army. That must be a big problem. Did you find it again? I found it. You must have been in trouble. Why are you saying this? It was found out of the blue 1 month later. Despite my confused expression, Li Hyunsung still looked serious. From then on, I kept the empty shell in my pocket. Isn't that a violation of military rule? That's right. I was amazed that he nodded so casually. I nodded curiously. I see. But why all of a sudden? No, I was suddenly reminded of the past. I looked at him and didn't know why he was saying this. Surely he didn't mean to cut off my head and put it in his pocket. In any case, it meant he was glad I was alive. We soon reached the altar that would lead to the second floor. We had enough demon proofs, and the only thing left was to place it on the altar and wait. At this time, Han Soo-young asked, "Is that a Juicy coming with us?" I turned and saw she was pointed to the pink kid Kim Yong-pal. I nodded and ordered, "Kim Yong-pal SSI. Lead the way." Huh? Kim Yong-pal freaked out, while Han Soo-young's eyes narrowed. What is that a Juicy for? Have you forgotten? The last gateway to the second floor. Those who collected the demon proofs on the first floor could only go up the next floor if they hunted the demon summoned after placing the proofs on the altar. However, the demon summoned from the second floor was based on the level of the weakest person in the party. Han Soo-young nodded like she understood. Aha, that's why you're putting the weakest person in the lead. Exactly. Kim Dokja is the best at being shameless. It isn't being shameless, but strategic. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is amazed at your awkwardness. The constellation Bald General of Justice wants you to show the dignity of a constellation. What was dignity of a constellation? I didn't make it through difficult scenarios by focusing on my dignity. I was a constellation, but sometimes I needed to play it smart. Han Soo-young said, "Then this gateway will be easily passed. As long as nothing happens." What can happen? Sometimes a demon will be summoned regardless of our level. I placed the demon proofs on the altar as I said this. The demon proofs have been placed. A demon appropriate to test you will be summoned. There was a blinding light from the altar and the demon started to be summoned. A colorful spotlight shone. If my prediction was correct, someone on the level of Kim Yong-pal would come out. Maybe it was Demon Baron Viller, the weakest of the demon nobles on the second floor. I would be able to suppress him without even using the power of a constellation. The demon who wants you is on the second floor. Eh? A demon unrelated to your level will be summoned. Han Soo-young stiffened as she heard the messages. Shit, what is this? Is this what you were talking about? Demon Earl Tentatio has descended. Earl? Majestic horns rose over the shoulders. The demon who appeared in the colorful spotlight was a powerful existence whom Viller couldn't compare to. A cruel smile was on his face as he opened his mouth. I see. Are you Yu Jong-hyuk? Chapter 156. Dark Castle. Part 6. Yu Jong-hyuk? What was this situation all of a sudden? The strongest beings on the second floor of Dark Castle, sometimes they would descend as a test. This had happened in ways of survival. However, a demon earl had never appeared in cases where Pink Kid Kim Yong-pal was part of the group. Besides that, why was the demon looking for Yu Jong-hyuk after being summoned? I didn't answer, and the demon breathed in before looking at Li Hyunsung. Are you Yu Jong-hyuk? I am Li Hyunsung. Then who is the person called Yu Jong-hyuk? I opened my mouth. There was nothing good about stimulating the demon earl here. Why do you want to find him? He isn't here, so go back. The demon earl Tentatio laughed at my words. A bug is talking back to me. It's strange. I heard that the person who is Seoul's strongest person is here. Seoul's strongest? That sounds like me. The party members all looked at me at the same time. Why were they looking at me like that? It was true. Tentatio also stared at me. You said that you're not Yu Jong-hyuk. The strongest in Seoul isn't Yu Jong-hyuk. It is me. What the hell was going on? Why was he looking for the strongest in Seoul? The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is sorry towards you. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is asking you to defeat this demon. Lady of the Brocade Sleep? I wondered reflexively. Suddenly, I got a sense of what was going on. You are staring at the constellations of Scylla. The constellations of Scylla are embarrassed. Yes, this was right. These bastards, they sold me to save their descendants? The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep shows what happened. The memory of Lady of the Brocade Sleep appeared in my head. The injured Min Jaiwan stuttered as she opened her mouth. Soul's strongest is Yu Jonghyuk. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is giving you a pathetic look. The act of showing one's memories required paying some probability and a significant amount of coins. The fact that she showed me her memory without hesitation meant the situation was urgent. Damn, then send him to Yu Jonghyuk. Why send him to me? Was I easy? I sighed lightly and spoke towards the air. Then what will you do for me if I help? The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep says she will pay coins. How much? Will you give me 2,000 coins again? The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep is embarrassed. Give me something else. Something helpful. The constellations of Scylla have their pride damaged and are angry at Lady of the Brocade Sleep. The constellation Lady of the Brocade Sleep says she will pay a story. A story? A new bounty scenario has arrived. Plus. Bounty scenario, fight against the demon, category, sub. Difficulty level, A+. Clear conditions, defeat the demon Earl, Tentatio. Time limit. Compensation, the trust of the constellations of Scylla, 1 history grade story. Failure. Plus. A history grade story. It was fairly decent. In fact, I was already going to kill the demon Earl without any conditions. The constellations of Scylla weren't as powerful as a nebula, but there was nothing bad about them owing me a debt. I had to defeat this demon anyway. The demon Earl was tired of waiting and growled out, "Why are you speaking to yourself? Then you're not Yu Jonghyuk?" A powerful airflow was released from Tentasio's body and Li Hyunsung quickly stepped forward. Dr. SSI, I'll take care of him. Hyunsung SSI, you can't do it alone. I will never lose the empty cartridge again. Han Suyong whistled like it was interesting. Tentatio made a complicated expression and grinned. You don't know who your opponent is. I like trampling on people like you. You don't know who I am? The earth shook and Li Hyunsung ran forward as he activated steel transformation. Li Hyunsung's shoulders became covered with steel as he struck Tentasio's shoulder horns. Li Hyunsung had the courage to face the demon Earl without backing off. You are someone who inherited a story? Tentatio wondered. Li Hyunsung's steel transformation was a stigma obtained by inheriting a story from Master of Steel. With one exchange, the demon noticed the value of Li Hyunsung. He was an Earl and knew the value of a story. I'll eat it. Tentatio embraced Li Hyunsung's body. Li Hyunsung continuously struck him with fists, but Tentatio wasn't fazed. Fangs emerged from the demon's mouth and he bit Li Hyunsung's shoulder. The strength of steel transformation was directly connected with Li Hyunsung's will. Unless his will was broken, Li Hyunsung's steel wouldn't be destroyed. Of course, this was written in ways of survival. However, it was only Li Hyunsung of the second half who fit such a wonderful description. Cracks started to appear in Li Hyunsung's hard steel. Li Hyunsung's expression started to pale. What the hell is this? Han Suyong's eyes shook as she watched Tentatio. Kim Dokja. What is that? I didn't think the soul rankings announced by the Dakibi were wrong. Apart from me, Han Suyong was the only one who knew the exact level of the demon Earl. I replied. He is a 3rd grade demon. Demon species above the 3rd grade had their own story. The 3rd grade demon, Tentatio, is telling the story of Bug Slaughter. Bug Slaughter. It was a pretty useful narrative. It wasn't in the form of a stigma yet, but its power exceeded the stigmas of incarnations since this was his own story. As Tentaccio's story started to be released, all the incarnations, including Li Hyunsung and Han Suyong, stood in place like hardened bugs. Li Jihai and Li Gilyung, who was still unconscious, twisted in pain while Kim Yongpal had already collapsed while foaming at the mouth. This was the real power of the story. It was to swallow other beings into the story. The frozen incarnations were waiting for their master's command. It is the time of slaughter, bugs. Li Hyunsung's steel shattered helplessly and Han Suyong's clones exploded. It was a complete wipeout. The storied bug slaughter showed overwhelming power against many weak people. The earls of the second floor were beyond measure. I held Li Hyunsung's shoulder as he was thrown back. Li Hyunsung was released from the fear at my touch and he stuttered. Didokje sasai. Move back. It isn't possible. If I don't protect Dokje sasai this time. A cartridge doesn't disappear so easily. Watch me. I patted Li Hyunsung's shoulder and walked forward. Tentaccio laughed like it was interesting. You can resist my story? You are someone with moderately strong mental power. Mental power isn't the problem. Then what? Kneel, bug. The pressure around us suddenly rose and people fell to their knees. Of course, I was fine. Tentaccio was confused as he watched me walking casually. It was thanks to fourth wall. There was also a more fundamental difference. Answer me. How can you move? In order to get that story, you have to pick at least 100,000 people with weak stories and kill them. You're quite a nasty bastard. What? This was the difference in status. Still, bug slaughter is a fairly usable story. At least, when the enemy is weaker than you. You aren't interested in the bug slaughter story. The effect of bug slaughter is negated by you. Tentaccio's eyes widened. At least Marquis grade, perhaps a demon king? No, that isn't likely. Are you a returnee? The peak of the demon species, the 72 demon kings were equivalent to narrative grade constellations. But a returnee can't be on the first floor of Dark Castle. That's right. Both are wrong. An existence with their status revealed was constrained by probability. You are looking at the demon Earl, Tentaccio. Tentaccio turned pale. I didn't delay and rushed towards Tentaccio while using white pure star energy. Blade of Faith has been activated. The special option of Unbroken Faith is activated. The ether attribute is converted to divine. The new texture of Unbroken Faith was unfamiliar to me. Quack! The demon screamed painfully as the ends of his horns were cut off. The second strike flew towards Tentaccio before he could move. It wasn't just that the Earl's story wasn't effective on me. My movements itself were different from ordinary constellations. The demon gritted his teeth. A constellation? No way, this is impossible. I wondered if I should borrow Messiah's path again, but I didn't need to use the quotation against bug slaughter. There was a limit to the number of quotations, and I also needed to check my abilities without a story. First, I needed to adjust my stats. Let's see. Physique LV 62 to Physique LV 90. Strength LV 60 to Strength LV 90, Agility LV 60 to Agility LV 90. Magic Power LV 62 to Magic Power LV 90, all stats have increased significantly. A total of 116,400 coins have been consumed. It was huge spending, but it was worth it. Your body is moving towards the limits of a human. A formidable energy has filled your body. All stats have reached the scenario limit. My heart beat faster as if I had received a caffeine transfusion. The adrenaline level in my body increased sharply, and my body became as light as a feather. My stats had an average level of 90. There was probably no one among the incarnations who had my stats. This was the only thing I could do as a constellation. Then let's go. I relentlessly swung my sword. Tentaccio's body was torn by the blade. Tentatio didn't fall easily, despite my stats suddenly rising. He seemed to be strengthening his body using his remaining magic power. It was a wise choice, because the story didn't work. Kwa wa. Tentatio let out a terrible scream. As the battle continued, 1 or 2 injuries appeared on my body. As expected, I couldn't fight him without any skills. Then this would work. The special skill miniaturization LV3 is activated. The effect of miniaturization has decreased the size of your body. What? The exclusive skill bookmark is activated. I will choose the 5th bookmark, Kyrios Rodgrain. It is confirmed that your body composition is similar to the corresponding character. The status of the character is higher than you. The level of the skill is being forcibly adjusted. Normally the messages would end here. However, one more line popped up. Your status has risen and coordination with the person will increase.